Hello and welcome to another BuildASoil FAQ video. Today, we've got a list of questions in our fundamental series, and they all relate to soil recipes versus bagged soil. Should I build my own living organic soil? And the reason why we wanted to discuss this is because many growers, when they get, however you figure it out, maybe it's a grow forum, maybe you go to like our website or a YouTube, maybe you went to Reddit, maybe you're on social media, heck, maybe your buddy has some fire, you know it, you asked him and he shared his recipe with you. Maybe he just mentioned living organic soil. At the end of the day, what happens, however you get introduced to the way, you start to ask questions and you start to wonder, like, should I make my own? Do I know enough? Is it really that easy? Should I buy bagged soil? I thought those weren't as good. And so what I'd like to go over today is, should I build my own soil? What's in a living soil recipe, like our 3.0, so that you know all the fundamentals of the ingredients, and then you can pick and choose better, all right? No matter where you live in the world, I want you to be able to do this. The cost versus like the control over each ingredient, the cook time versus no cook time, we'll discuss those arguments. Best practices, I'm gonna try and hit it all. So if I miss something, I'm trying to speak from the heart as I would to a friend that's asking these questions. And so if I miss something, please post it in here with your questions that I can be more specific. It'll help many other growers as they're looking into living organic soil. Let's talk about that. Should I build my own soil? You know, in the beginning of these super soils, before living organic soil was a thing. And if you're curious, you can go to the BuildASoil.com website, go to educational, go to blog. We have one on what living organic soil is. We also have an episode here on YouTube where I go over that stuff. Those are part of the fundamentals. And so it's important to kind of get an understanding. But let's say you're just, you get it, right? And you're here and it's like, should I build my own soil? Well, the ingredients back in the day, like in those super soils, were kind of available at garden centers. You could mix and match certain products that you could buy, and they started with a base potting soil, and then you'd make your super soil. I feel like, to me, the comparison has often been made to like a chef preparing something for a guest that he loves. And this would be like for our plants. We're preparing this potting soil for them. And one method would be to start with a base soil and then add ingredients to it. And you absolutely can. But in the beginning, a lot of us looked like kind of starting with canned ingredients and then putting them into the crock pot. It's not really cooking. It's not fast food, but like it's not cooking. And so you're just starting with the ultimate would be buying those raw ingredients and then making it from scratch, or growing them yourself, then using those raw ingredients. And so there's levels to it at every level with that culinary kind of comparison, even though it's totally different, right? And so fast forward, now we're looking at living organic soil. Most people, when they're wanting to make their own, they don't want to start with a bagged soil. You totally can. We're gonna explain when it might make sense, of course. We sell bagged potting soil. So I'm really wanting to speak to you like a friend about this subject so that you can decide, because I have a competitive interest that's to sell potting soil, but I can't sell the potting soil unless I'm honest, and then whoever buys, right? And so this is the most important part to me, is like, you absolutely 100% can build your own soil from scratch, and it'll probably blow your mind how well it works, so long as you follow the basic principles. I'll go over some of those with you. I'm not going to go in great detail. We've made videos on that, but it'll help you understand what goes into making a potting soil, and then what the differences might be when you bag it versus what you might buy off the shelf. And then for sure, if you're going to go and buy something off the shelf, we've done tests on this before. You can check out our YouTube, from like Home Depot or these big box stores like Walmart, and grab something that says like organic soil. Look into the ingredients and start to learn about that, because it's kind of similar to the grocery store. A lot of times they use marketing, and you get a product, and once you learn about ingredients, you're kind of disappointed. No wonder it's only $3 a bag. It was from the municipal waste plant down the street, and it has potentially forever chemicals and human biosolids that they say are safe. There's like some crazy stuff. And so while most of the potting soils that we get like at the grow store won't be like that. You just got to know when you're brand new to this. So please look into that. But when it comes to making your own potting soil, there are ingredients that we all use. And the most important one that you have to be able to source anywhere in the world if you're going to make your own is going to be the compost and the worm castings. Because if you just like go on Craigslist, or if you just go online and buy whoever's closest locally, it could just be municipal, and that may not be good. It could be like A1 garden municipal, and that may not be good for you depending on what it's made out of. You do want to like learn more about it, right? You want it to be finished. There's some ways to tell like the carbon to nitrogen ratio. You can buy a small amount and try it. You can get the lab analysis and ask around. There's lots of tools. You can probably ask GPT for a little help with some of the basics, but when it comes down to it, you're going to need to source something good. And so BuildASoil has put a lot of effort into sourcing across the United States composts that we feel are extra quality, and we actually, to great effort, bring them all the way into Colorado so that we can mix with those. And I promise you, we would not do that if it weren't worth it. And so I think that it's very important for you to know it's worth it for you too. That's the cornerstone. I'd love it if down the street somebody just made truckloads of compost that we could use. We've tried everything locally. It's usually woody, and it's used with cow manure, and it's usually super high in nutrients on like an ag index rating, and it's finished and done right, but it is really like high in salts, and it's like it robs nitrogen from the wood, even though the carbon nitrogen ratio says it's finished. I just don't like a lot of the composts out here. And we have tried. So if you know a source in Colorado that makes the goods, that'd be really cool. Otherwise, go to BuildASoil. We have premium compost that we found, and people use those to mix in their homemade potting soil, and we use them here. That's part of the difference is when you get a bag of BuildASoil, like you can see one back there, we have a bagged potting soil. It's still not the same as homemade, but the ingredients are. What I mean is we like buy the expensive compost. We bring it in with freight by the truckload to help make it economic. We quality control, we mix it, we test it. It has to cook. Like literally we have to mix this on the line, and it's supposed to be just mix it and plant into it. That's why these like machines were made. We mix it. We have tests for the moisture. We put an exact hand weight amount into the hopper. We do batches that know before and after how much went into it. We weigh them while we're doing volume. All of this matters because then they have to cook or compost and come together, and they heat up. And so depending on the recipe is how much cook time we provide, and we use indicators like temperature, and we've gone through lots of process to land at a certain process that works. And then after that's done, we have to put it back into the machinery. We then remix it from the outside to the inside through the machine. And then we remoisten it back to the level that we want for the bag. Then it gets tossed into the hopper where it mixes again to get put into the bag. That is a ton. It's kind of foolish from a business perspective, but it's what it takes to make living soil. And so with that being said, you can do a great job at home. You just have to plan ahead a little bit, have the time. We'll talk later about cook time versus no cook time and like how to evaluate that. But that's what it takes to make BuildASoil. And so if you just go out there and grab the wrong compost and you go through all that work and you spend money importing all these ingredients to make your own, man, it can be a problem if the compost is bad. For instance, high magnesium and sodium and maybe low calcium, low phosphorus, high in organic matter that's like woody and wants to rob nitrogen. It can ruin a soil mix. So make sure you've got good compost or worm castings, or preferably both. Once you've figured that out, then you're kind of home free in the sense of now you can shop around anywhere in the world for clean amendments. And it's pretty simple. Like literally you can grind your own. Like if you had seeds, like you could even probably take beans and grind them into a flour. That's a seed meal. So we'll use seed meals for specific purposes. In the beginning, we use a lot of neem and karanja. We use a mustard seed that has properties that release enzymes for a short period of time once they're wet that help biofumigate the soil and clean it of like fungus gnat larvae, things like that. So that's a really cool amendment. Where you live, you might have access to some really awesome seed meals. What we try and avoid, you should too, right? Like you don't want to use the GMO seeds that they spray with Roundup. You don't want to use those crops unless you know they're totally non-GMO, like an ancient grain version like corn or something. But prefer just to find novel sources in your local area. We like to use insect frass, so you can learn more about ingredients. I don't want to go on a rabbit hole there, but you have to be discerning and you have to learn what ingredients to add. And so you can read our write-up on making your own complete organic fertilizer. Steve Solomon is who taught me in his book, The Intelligent Gardener, along with Clackamas Coot. And then I was able to make comparisons for why they did things and learn. And you should do the same. We have a write-up on our blog about that. But once you find the way to add some rock dust for trace minerals, you find the seed meals for the nutrition, and maybe you find like gypsum or oyster shell flour for your calcium source, or both, and you've set on the recipe, you still want to make sure that you get quality ones. And that's why people set out to make living soil instead of just getting like the pre-made whatever ingredients have a tomato on it or something at the garden store. Because if you read the ingredients, a lot of times they're all the same. They're just different ratios with different pictures on them. And you might be surprised to find that they're like the cheapest ones. Like they might just be steamed bone meal, and a lot of times they'll put like a pinch of guano, and they'll have a lot of, in the organic ones, like poultry manure products that don't come from organically fed farms. So it's kind of like you might as well just buy the non-organic meals and not really care about it. You can just use soybean, non-organic, because they're just feeding that to the chickens anyways. So like once you figure that out, what you have to look at is, am I making enough soil for this to really make financial sense? And so let's say, ideally, to really heat up, you want to have at least 100, minimum 200 gallons of soil, or about a cubic yard. When you're making compost, the 3x3x3, like the 1 cubic yard, that's the minimum where you get this thermophilic reaction. I think it happens in a lesser volume when you're making living soil. It's a little denser and easier to keep like right in the right range. It's also different than compost from scratch. But if you're gonna make like 5 gallons of it or 10 gallons of it, and let's just say you really wanna experience it. Like you're like, I don't care how much the meal costs to make. I wanna buy every ingredient from scratch. Go out there and buy each ingredient. It's just that you might have to buy like a 50-pound bag of this one, a 10-pound bag of that, ship it from different places, get it all in place, and then you can make your recipe. And it's really, really fun. Alternative to that, BuildASoil has made like our Clackamas Coots kit, which has the original formula in it, already mixed. And so you can hand measure that and trust us on the ingredient sourcing and do research so you can verify. We have our 3.0 kits. We have our craft blend. Those are hacks that exist now that didn't exist when I started BuildASoil. And so that's part of the vision here, right? Is solving problems. I'm just looking at notes because I want to make sure I cover everything. And I don't often do this, but for the fundamentals, you can see I'm just like chicken scratching all my stuff. I want to make sure that I am covering without going too wild. So should I build my own soil? If you're making enough to make it economically worth it, even a cubic yard can get really out of range in cost if you go wild with your ingredients list and you have to buy a lot. And then the key is, if you can find a compost local to you that's really good, I mean, you've made it, because that's a big part of the cost, is getting the shipping on the volume of that. Because most of these recipes, you want to be like anywhere from 15 to 35% compost. On average, like 30%, let's say, 25%, like that is a lot of compost and weight to go buy to make a cubic yard. That's like buying, 9 cubic feet. They could weigh 50 pounds each bag. So that could be like 450 pounds of compost just to make a cubic yard. And so it starts to get kind of heavy. Not everybody has the space for it. And so if you don't have the space, if you don't want to source all the ingredients, if you're just going to make a really small amount, it might make more sense to buy a bagged soil. But I've had people buy it and split it up between homies and just do it in a tarp and figure it out. So if there's a will, there's a way, and I encourage you to try. The other thing a lot of people do, like on the smallest level that I've seen work pretty well, we have a kit called the Take and Bake, and that's where we ship you the individual bags and the nutrients. That way you can make it all from scratch. And what I really like is the growers that do this, like they get their hands in it and they understand what it's like from scratch, from the beginning, and they really take ownership of the soil and they trust it so much that when issues pop up, they usually learn to adapt the watering, understand how to re-amend it. And with that much faith, because you make it from scratch and you know what's in it, it causes you to kind of check that box off and move on to the next thing in your grow environment. Where if you just buy a random soil at like Walmart, you might be wondering the whole time, like, is the soil the problem, right? And I'm trying to solve these other issues. So I do think homemade is really good for that. And if you follow these base recipes and you're even mildly like in range, I think you'll do really well. Because all these recipes are set to use gypsum or oyster shell. The gypsum is probably the most important in my opinion. It jacks the calcium and it kind of organizes the living soil. As soon as you add all that compost, peat moss, and aeration, it makes a really good potting soil. I'm leaving out details on the soil recipe. This is not like a how to make it. It's more like why should I, those things, right? So if you're looking for the how to, you can go to our BuildASoil educational area and we have recipes on the complete system. We're happy to talk about that stuff. But this is more like, once you know the recipe, is it worth it? Should I do it? When bagged soil might make sense, and also like what's wrong with bagged soil, even from BuildASoil, what could go wrong? If you are gonna make enough, or let's say you're like, I don't care, I'm gonna spend the money and I'm only gonna make 20 gallons, is it still gonna be good? Yes, it just may not heat up the same way and that much volume, and so it might not be as pre-broken down, so to speak, but I think it should work. And all I want you to do is mix it, moisten it properly to a squeeze test where it's not gushing water, there's just a bead of water in there. I want you to put it in like a tub and let it breathe a little, not sealed up, or put it on a tarp and fold it. I want you to check that for heat in the center of that 20 gallons. If it starts to get hot, you'll know it'll burn your hand in the middle. If it starts to get really warm, turn it from the outside to the inside and do it till it stops, no matter your pile size. Then you should be good to go. Even if you make 5 gallons, it's totally fine, you can do it. And at the end, I'm gonna get into cooking versus not cooking. Is it really necessary? And it turns out it depends, okay? It depends on the ingredients, we'll discuss that. But this was an argument back on the forums. I'd like to share it with you so you know what I've found out. So look for that at the end. If you're researching and you're just not quite confident yet on all the ingredients, and it's kind of turning into a lot, like even if you just go to BuildASoil and you buy like the Coots kit, and then you go to source your compost and you're hesitant. Maybe you get there and everyone said it's a good compost, and you get there and like the bags are torn at the shop and it's dry, or you're just like, I don't know. Maybe the test and all the research, you find out it's not quite that good, and now you're like back at square one and you don't have enough time. There are a lot of reasons why using a bagged potting soil is a really good idea. But at the same time, I want you at some point, if you have it in you, to make your own. So those are kind of the pros and cons. But let's say you're gonna go do it, and now you're like, hey, I don't want the bagged potting soil. I know it makes sense, I'm not making that much. I know I could trust BuildASoil, or I could find another living soil brand that I trust, and I could just make it. But since BuildASoil exists, I'm just gonna grab a bagged potting soil. What are the pros and cons? All right. If you were to go to the store and grab any bagged potting soil, or grab a BuildASoil, we all have the same problem. No matter how good the intent was, when you put it in a bag, okay, and you seal it up in here, and then you change the temperature a million times, ship it all over the country, put it on a shelf, you bring it home, and then you finally go to use it, we just can't 100% control the chain of custody, the quality control once it leaves the building. And even then, like, you go to all the work to make this meal and then you just put it in the to-go container, right? I mean, like, it's not gonna be the same as plating it fresh. It's to go. It's like to-go food, even though this is clean, good ingredient, made with love. Once you drop it into a bag, like, it's in a bag. And so I feel like no matter what, when you get a bagged potting soil, you should tend to it with some love. And so a lot of living soil growers will put it into a tub, they'll check the moisture, they'll re-moisten it, they might put a little like kashi on there or a little craft blend to kind of activate the biology in there, and you'll see it grow mycelium. And then they'll turn that in and they'll just check and make sure it's the perfect moisture. They might put in like a couple worms, and then from there, they have the beginning of what is a living soil. But I think out of a bag, and even homemade, until you get some roots into it, it's not really a living organic soil. So that's why a part of our new container setup, we like to put a mulch layer and some cover crop and some mulch like on top of that like layer right away. And not everybody likes to do that, but I feel like it sets up this soil that you're going to keep forever and not throw away. And it's part of the process. And I'd rather just be upfront. It's not for everyone. If you're going to buy even BuildASoil and say, all right, I've had customers do this. They're like, well, I bought BuildASoil, I cut the bag, I dumped it in the container, I put the plant and watered it, and I didn't get perfect results. And it's like, I just know, because I've seen buddies do this where like, they're just like glugging the water out of a jug. There's no mulch. The plant's too big for the container. The light's too bright. And so I'm not accusing you of that, but I'm just saying you can see how as a business owner, it really behooves us to do the education because we really want people to get the results. I'm not just like, yeah, sell the soil and hopefully they don't fuck it up. It's their fault if they do. Like, yeah, that might be true, but then I'm out of business and people don't like living soil. And so we really, really want to teach and make sure people succeed. And no matter where you get the soil, like bring it to life. It's important. The other consideration I will say, if you're ordering it and it's going through, like you live somewhere where it's 120 degrees out and you get living organic soil and it was sealed, like ours have perforations in them, so they breathe just enough where I'd rather have it dry down a tiny bit. You can always bring it back to life versus go rancid and smell terrible. We've had both happen over the years. Ask me how I know. And none of those processes have like ruined soil, but it ruins the expectations for the customer. Like you finally just want to hit the easy button, right? Get a bag soil and make it all work. And then that happens. So BuildASoil has gone through a ton over the last 12 years, longer, to figure it all out. And changing just as much as a small bag makes a huge difference. And so we put a lot of effort and thought into this. And so when you're done, even making your own soil from scratch, I've had people just throw it into a Rubbermaid tub and seal the lid on it and wonder when they come back, it's growing all crazy colors of mold, and it smells bad and it's dripping and raining water from the top of the lid. It's like, you have to make sure if you put this effort in that you kind of store it right. It just needs to stay kind of wet and breathe so that it's not going completely anaerobic. You can recover from that, but it's less ideal. So I just want you to know the pros and cons there. We also, like if you buy a bag potting soil from BuildASoil, we guarantee it. We've got a 60-day guarantee. We make it here in-house. We order the ingredients. We test. We publish the results. We bag it ourselves. We move it to our own warehouse. We don't send it to Amazon. When somebody buys it on Amazon, it comes from our warehouse. We're responsible for the entire thing. And so that makes a huge difference. Then when it goes to grow shops, we're not out there like calling every grow store. We have a social media outreach. People hear about us. Customers of BuildASoil tell their local shop. They call us. We want to make sure that they're not just the average shop, that they do care. And hopefully they have good quality control of our products there and you can really trust them. Still bring it back to life. Still follow these good practices and you'll have really good success, whether you make your own, whether you buy a bagged soil. And I think, like I said, you'll have good results. We went over like the cost versus the control. So you can just go buy like a tomato fertilizer. You can go buy a bag of worm castings and you can follow a living soil recipe, but it's gonna lack a little bit. It's gonna be more like a super soil. When you go get good quality ingredients and you make everything from scratch, or you use a company that works with living soil growers, so we care about the ingredients, we've at least sourced them independently. That's one of those things where like, now you're making real living organic soil. Now you get to dig your hands in and make it from scratch. And you really get all the benefits. And what's cool is it can move with you. Like you can put it in the tubs, take it to your next house. Or a lot of times if you have like a little plot in the backyard and you're lucky to have some ground, like the next person gets to enjoy it as soon as you move. And so depending on where you're at in your life, this might make a ton of sense for you. It may not. You can build a raised garden bed. You can learn how to do this type of stuff without making potting soil. You can treat the native soil. And we've done that. We teach that too. That's what we did on our vegetable farm. But for those that are comparing making a soil recipe versus a bagged soil, I just wanted to have that discussion. Other things that can happen besides the compost, if you buy the wrong compost, if you just go to the local garden store, a lot of times like at the local co-op, some of these like meals, like feather meal and stuff that I try and avoid, like it's been there in the same bag for like 5 years. They just kind of keep it on the shelf. They don't sell a lot of it. So it depends on where you buy it. You can go buy a lot of stuff online. And so if that's you, learn about this stuff, figure out how much it's gonna cost to follow the recipe, see if it's really worth it. A lot of times it's cheaper. You can just buy a yard from BuildASoil, or you can ship like one of those 3.0 kits, or you can get like a take and bake. I think the key is if you live somewhere where you know you have good compost, you can save a lot of money making your own, and it just really becomes worth it. So I guess other things to compare, like think about if you're wondering, things that I think about probably don't matter as much, but since we have our own packing facility here and we started from scratch in my garage, like I just learned a lot about this stuff, and most potting soils, they're just made at a couple facilities. And it's because, like, for instance, there's a dairy operation, they handle a lot of waste, then they start selling yard amendments, then they have a bagging machine, then they start mixing and selling for all the small companies, where a lot of them are made at like one facility. When it gets really up in the brands, it's like different labels and it's all made by similar people. But what's interesting is their list of ingredients, a lot of stuff we wouldn't use, that's all in the hoppers and on the line. And so if somehow a little living soil company gets the ability to like use that co-packer somehow, or they work out a relationship for someone else to make the soil, it's like someone else is making the meal. Like it's just from their list of ingredients. Or if it's special ingredients, it's not like they can go clean the entire line and drop in only their ingredients. There's gonna be little bits of remnants. And so I like that ours is only made living soil and that's it. We don't make anything else here. And so, it matters to me. It may not matter to everyone, but I feel like that's the benefit you get for like being a real company. A lot of companies these days are like some guy in his bedroom and like he's got a marketing guy in this state and an accounting guy over here and a merchandising person that drives around in it from here, and they operate a remote office and they just drop ship through suppliers that receive orders and do mixes and co-packing, and it's like arbitrage business. Like you can come here, you can see it, we make it right there. And so that's part of why we explain it. The cook time versus no cook time. And it's funny because in that original like recycling organic on IC Mag, Gascanis Ken started it. Coot was in there right away with his recipe. A lot of other people jumped in, and Microbe Man was on there. And some of the conversations were like, oh, make sure you cook your soil. And it makes sense. I recommend it. What I mean is when you pile your ingredients together, you're gonna put a third peat moss, a third aeration like pumice or rice hulls, a third premium compost or castings. Then you're gonna sprinkle your minerals and your amendments on there. Then you're gonna mix it all together and make sure the moisture is perfect. You can watch our take and bake video, like making soil from scratch. We show that in a big 100-gallon pot. It's gonna start to warm up, and it'll surprise you. When you make at least a cubic yard, sometimes you'll stick your hand in there and you can use a thermometer. It'll be like 140 degrees. It'll really surprise you. And so that cooking process is what a lot of people say you must do. But if you're making 5 gallons with little mixes of ingredients and you make different tweaks on a recipe to try it, it's never gonna go through that process in a 5-gallon pot like it would in a 200-gallon container, where it's got all of the mass that causes the composting to really kickstart and get active. And so we were like, well, do you have to do that? Like, do you have to let it sit for a month if it's not even warming? And so what we all decided, what everyone ultimately decided, Coot's like, dude, I just mixed that shit up and I plant immediately into it. Why would you ever cook? Digging deeper, he mixes his amendments through the worm bin. So by the time he makes the potting soil, it's pretty ready to go. The Coot's recipe, if you follow it and you use a premium compost, you can mix and go. But as soon as you start to add in extra ingredients, little fishbone meal, little alfalfa meal, maybe the compost isn't completely finished, it'll heat up. It'll heat up real quick. And so it's like you should cook it. But if you're making it in a small batch, it won't go through that process, in which case it'll still work. It just has to come alive a little bit and come together by biology and moisture in that container. The worst is though when you don't know it, and maybe you make it in different tubs, and then you go carry it and dump it into a big 4x4 bed, and all of a sudden it comes up to temperature right after you plant it. The plants can handle a lot, but if it gets 140 degrees in there, it's gonna cook your batch, and then the soil will be great afterwards, but like it can be a problem. So you don't have to cook your soil, and you do have to cook your soil, which means it depends. The best is, because you don't know for sure, depending on the recipe and everything you're using, mix it up, let it sit, don't rush it. If it gets hot, then you know it's gotta cook. And so just like making a fast compost, which you can look up the world record tomato grower, he teaches how to make his own. It's a badass recipe, it's easy. Once it gets hot, you wanna turn it. That way the outside that didn't get hot goes to the inside, that gets hot. And you just do that over and over again until it stops getting hot. And so if you're making a little batch of soil and it gets hot and you open your tarp and you go, wow, it's hot, or your 100-gallon container, however you're doing it, mix it. Check the next day. If it's hot again, mix it. It'll stop doing it. And then you'll know it's ready to be planted into. The rule of thumb, if you don't want to turn it a lot and you just want to let it chill and do its thing, couple weeks, it's probably going to be good. So that's the rule of thumb on cooking. But to be clear, to be correct, like if you do it how Coot does it, you don't have to. And what's behind that, behind the scenes, is there's an amount of carbon that you're adding when you add rod amendments and nitrogen, and that ratio, if too wide, will activate the composting thermophilic process, and the biology and everything will go to work to break that down with the moisture and everything being right. And so when you're adding only a small amount of amendments, like some kelp meal, some calciums, like the Coots mix, a little crustacean, and you're not going wild with nutrients that really heat up when activated, like the alfalfa and others, you may not need to cook it all. And so why don't you comment on here? A lot of people follow this. They may be watching and they do make their own living soil. They're just playing this in the background, seeing if I'm talking about what they know. Tell me, like, do you cook yours? Do you not cook yours? Do you think it's a must? Because I've tried every way. I've definitely had problems. Like, dude, we tried to make a, do you guys remember? Maybe some of you remember. What was it called? I think it was peat. Hey, what was that fake peat moss called, Dave? Pro moss? Pit moss. It was pit moss. Okay, so the guy was on the Shark Tank trying to make a peat replacement called pit moss, and I was like, oh my God, I need that. So got in touch with the guy, and long story short, after years of trying to figure it out, I think he got bought out. Something happened. They sold the business, and they were now pushing it. They sent me some, and I tried to make soil with it, and it's like shredded newspaper, basically. It lit up the hottest I'd ever seen potting soil because it was just straight carbon. And so they'd recommend like chicken manure and all this stuff. They talked about formulations and how to maybe make it work. We actually sold like a peat-free pit moss soil because we got it to work. It just never worked as good though. It just robbed nitrogen in my opinion. So I don't even know where I was going with that, but cook time can be affected by the ingredients you're using. So it's best to just test. Otherwise, the rule of thumb is like, you don't always have to. I think I've covered all the stuff. I kind of talked in circles, but I tend to do that. If you're watching this, I'm guessing maybe you like my style where you get a little extra nugget out of the ramblings. I try and be organized, especially with these fundamentals, but this is really like a weird one as far as like, it's not specific things and numbers. This is, what do you think about when deciding, do I make my own or not? I always think it's worth it. Other factors I would throw in at the end, when I started making my own from scratch, part of what really connected me to it was the sourcing the ingredients was actually fun. It was way more expensive to source enough to make a cubic yard at a time than it was worth. That's why I started BuildASoil, because I started buying 50-pound bags. I started realizing a pallet would be cheaper. Then I had buddies that wanted some. Eventually I started mixing. In the beginning, it was like, yo, you pick what ingredients and you make your own nutrient kit, and nobody knew what to add. So I just started helping. We started mixing potting soil. But the cool ingredients you could do that I don't talk about a lot, like I don't want to send people out there to ruin the earth, but like we used to just go up to the national forest and be super conservative here, don't do damage, but I'd bring a shovel. I'd go out there and smoke a little, have some fun, make a day out of it. And you'd go find under a tree, under some bushes, you'd look for like areas that looked extra fertile. And you would just go take some of the compost from underneath those areas, and you would scoop that up and you would add that to like a bucket. And then you would do your best to kind of recover that area, not take too much from one spot. You'd bring it home and you would add that wild living substance with all the microbes from it right into your pile. And so obviously a lot of us were like, well, like, how do I know that's the right stuff to add to a potting soil? And so obviously when you do research, like a full canopy jungle rainforest by the equator is super fertile, and it might start off just as lava rock, and there's like this whole expansion in between there. The prairie zone and like how that works, you can research that and try and target like the perfect bacterial, fungal, whatever. But honestly, like when you add a little bit from your local area and you went and harvested it, like it feels pretty cool. So you could try and do that, just be responsible. Other things I've seen people do, like they'll take their own crustaceans that they've caught and they'll make crustacean meal from it. Obviously, like be careful on the sourcing. Like if it's something that you'd be eating for your family, then it's probably safe, but not all the waters that you might harvest in bulk amount like would be appropriate. Rice holes, I've seen people like, they live near a farm that has like waste holes and they scoop them. It's not good. We use like parboiled ones on purpose because they won't germinate. And so like not every ingredient, you want to do research about them, but the forest one is a good one. Trying to think of other things. Oh, biochar. We obviously add biochar to 3.0, but you can go down rabbit holes when it comes to making your own soil. And so a lot of people will get into pyrolysis. They'll learn to make their own like reactor or their own biochar kiln basically, and they'll heat an area. Like out here, beetle kill wood is like cheap or free practically because the problem. And so you can heat an area and the waste can be captured as biochar, and they're actually capturing the fumes. We were selling a product that's like the liquid smoke from that process that has some hormones in it. So all those little cool things are part of why people like making their own soil. They really learn about maybe one aspect and they want to control the quality and they want to make it from scratch. But then a lot of us were like, yo, let's just go buy like the charcoal briquettes, the hardwood ones. And I'm sure it worked, but like, it's not as good as the biochar we can get nowadays for agriculture that we bring in to mix in the potting soil. So do your research, have fun with this stuff, learn about all the ingredients. And if you've got a question, if you're like, man, I just can't find an answer, post it up here on the BuildASoil video, message the crew. We have like a chat bot, but you can always talk to a human. And what's behind that is like my information I give it. So it might be able to answer your question, but we can, and they can always escalate it to me, and I can like be like, yo, where do you live? Like, no, that's not a good ingredient, or that is a good ingredient. And while I don't have a ton of time to do that for everybody, I find that most people are able to solve it. And if it's a really unique question, a lot of times I'm interested. So hit us up if you've got a question. Otherwise, thanks for listening to this random video on soil recipes versus bag soil. Things to think about, ingredients, cook time versus not cook time. If you've got questions about it, please post it up in this video so that I can do a better job, as I've talked kind of a lot today, and I want to make sure that people that are actually really trying to solve a problem here, they get their answer. Otherwise, as you know, please take a minute, hit the subscribe button there on YouTube if you haven't done so already. Otherwise, tell your friends about this stuff. And until next time, I'll see you on the next BuildASoil video.